The air in my parents' house always smelled the same: old money, lemon polish, and a faint undercurrent of unspoken expectations. At 36, I was back in my childhood bedroom, ostensibly helping them declutter before they moved to a smaller place, but mostly just feeling the familiar weight of being the responsible daughter. My mother, Caroline, hovered in the doorway, her voice soft, laced with that particular blend of concern and gentle disappointment she reserved just for me. "Aria, dear, you don't have to do this all at once. I know you're busy with work. And after everything." She trailed off, a delicate sigh finishing the sentence, referencing my recent messy divorce from Thomas. A divorce where they had somehow managed to side entirely with him, nodding along to his claims about my stubbornness and difficulty, as if I was the unreasonable one for wanting out of a marriage built on his subtle control. "It's fine, Mom," I said, carefully stacking a teetering pile of old photo albums. "You said you wanted it done before the movers come." I moved towards a dusty corner, drawn to a heavy, forgotten-looking trunk. It wasn't just about decluttering. Coming back here always felt like sifting through the detritus of my own history, a history where I was consistently cast as the capable, slightly cold counterpart to my sister Naomi. Naomi, 3 years younger, was the family's perpetual delicate flower. Prone to anxieties, sensitive, needing constant reassurance. At least, that was the story. She floated into the room then, dressed in soft pastels, looking pale and slightly fragile, exactly as she always did when she wanted something, or wanted you to think she needed something. "Oh, Becca, you're covered in dust," she said, using my childhood nickname, which always grated. "You really shouldn't be doing this alone. It's too much." She didn't offer to help, just wrung her hands slightly. "How are you settling into the new apartment?" Thomas mentioned it was small. The casual cruelty hit its mark. Thomas and Naomi had apparently become quite close during the divorce proceedings, bonding over my supposed flaws. Dinner was the usual museum of forced politeness. My father, John, carved the roast, his movements precise and practiced, but his eyes held a familiar guardedness. Naomi picked at her food, sighing dramatically about a stressful day. The conversation circled warily around safe topics before Mom cleared her throat, exchanging a look with Dad. "We have something important to discuss," Caroline began, her voice gaining a formal edge that made my stomach clench. The last time she'd used that tone, she was explaining why they felt Thomas's concerns about my emotional state during the divorce were valid. "Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking," John continued, setting down his knife. "With our age and the market, we've decided to make arrangements for the business. The family business. Not a sprawling corporation, but a solid, respected firm John had built from the ground up. It was their life's work, their legacy." Caroline reached across the table, her hand finding Naomi's. "We're transferring full ownership and control to Naomi." The words hung in the air like poison. The roast turned to ash in my mouth. "Everything? The business? To Naomi?" My voice was a flat, disbelieving whisper. "The business?" "Yes, dear," Mom said, her eyes glistening with what looked suspiciously like practiced sympathy. "It makes sense. Naomi needs the security. Her health, her sensitivities, they make traditional work difficult. The business will provide for her. Aria, you're so capable. Such a survivor. You always land on your feet." I looked at Naomi. Her head was bowed, her expression one of demure humility, but I saw the almost imperceptible upward curve of her lips, a tiny flicker of triumph in her downcast eyes. Survivor. The word felt like a brand. It had always been their justification for giving Naomi everything while expecting me to handle anything. Handle my own problems, my own divorce, my own life, because I was strong. But handling deliberate, calculated unfairness? "Right," I said, standing up slowly. The scrape of my chair sounded deafening in the sudden silence. "The survivor. If you'll excuse me, I think I need some air." I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor my father had installed when Naomi and I were children. Behind me, I heard Naomi's soft, concerned voice. "Should I go after her? She seems upset." "No, darling," Mom replied. "You know how she gets. She just needs time to process." Processing. I stood on the porch, the cool evening air a shock after the stuffy tension inside. Processing the gut punch of realizing they were rewarding Naomi's fabricated fragility with everything my father had worked for after abandoning me when I was at my lowest. Processing the deep, chilling unfairness that had defined my life with them. Back inside, pretending to look for a forgotten scarf, my hand brushed against the dusty trunk again. The hidden box. A sudden, cold certainty settled in my chest. This wasn't just about an unfair will. There was something buried here. Something they didn't want found. Something that connected the dots between Naomi's endless need and their endless willingness to provide, no matter the cost. I slipped the key to the attic into my pocket. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be decluttering. I'd be excavating. I texted Claire, found something interesting. Need your brain. And a bottle of that good wine. Her reply came almost instantly. On my way. Bring snacks. This sounds juicy. I smiled, a grim, determined smile. Juicy didn't even begin to cover it. This felt like the beginning of a war. And I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. Claire arrived armed with a battle plan, 2 bottles of Malbec, and a laptop that looked like it had seen more action than a war correspondent. My apartment, small and blessedly free of the suffocating history of my parents' house, felt like a safe harbor. We spread the contents of the hidden box across my living room floor. Okay, hit me, Claire said, pouring wine. What did the attic cough up? I pulled out the bundle of old documents, the faded ribbons still holding them together. It's mostly old business records, but I showed her the personal letters mixed in. Letters from Naomi to a friend, dated roughly 15 years ago. And the confusing financial spreadsheets alongside them. We started reading, cross-referencing dates with the cryptic business memos. The period matched a significant financial downturn my father had always vaguely referred to as a challenging market adjustment and unforeseen losses. An adjustment that led to layoffs, including Ethan's dismissal. Naomi's letters were initially teenage rambling, but they began to focus on the business. Casual mentions of working there part-time during the summer, of finding loopholes, and then a shift in tone. Excitement about a big project, hints of impressing her father, followed by increasingly anxious entries about things not going as planned and needing to fix it. Then came the disturbing parts. References to my little project went sideways, handling the Ethan problem, and worrying about Dad finding out the real cost. Handling the Ethan problem? Claire frowned, looking at the spreadsheets. They showed a series of complex, almost deliberately confusing transactions culminating in a massive financial loss, masked as a failed investment or a client default. There were also expenses filed under consulting fees that looked highly suspicious. We pulled up old news articles online about the business downturn. It was reported as a tough period, but nothing scandalous. Ethan's name came up in a list of key employees laid off. He was described in older articles as a rising star in the company's finance department. Okay, so Naomi clearly screwed something up big time, Claire said, tapping a pen on the coffee table. And it looks like she blamed Ethan. The memos from my father's office became chillingly clear in this context. Internal notes about containing the situation, minimizing exposure, and handling necessary adjustments for optics. And buried within the financial records, we found it, a paper trail of significant payments made from a seemingly obscure company account, routed through a shell entity, all around the time Ethan was fired. Each payment was just under the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting. Hush money, I whispered, the word tasting like ash. Looks like it, Claire confirmed, her journalist instincts kicking in. Disguised as something else, probably part of a severance package with a hefty NDA attached. They paid him off to keep him quiet, and to keep Naomi's name out of it. The picture forming was horrifying. Naomi hadn't just made a mistake. She had deliberately caused a major financial loss of fraud, essentially, and then systematically framed an innocent employee, ruining his career and reputation. And my parents, knowing at least some of the truth, had actively participated in the cover-up to protect their delicate daughter. She blamed Ethan. I said, the unfairness of it all twisting in my gut. I remembered Ethan vaguely, quiet, smart, always seemed kind. We need to find him, Claire stated. If anyone can corroborate this, it's him. And he deserves to know the truth came out. Tracking down Ethan wasn't easy after 15 years, but Claire had her sources. We found a possible address, a stale social media profile. I drafted the email carefully, agonizing over the words. How do you tell someone their life was derailed by your family's lies and your sister's malice? His reply came 2 days later. Brief, cautious, but agreeing to a video call. When his face appeared on screen, he looked older, tired around the eyes, but there was a flicker of something else there. Curiosity, perhaps hope. Aria, he said, sounding unsure. I explained everything. The discovery in the attic, the documents, the financial records. I described Naomi's letters. As I spoke, his expression shifted from wary to stunned, then to a deep, painful understanding. He told me his side of the story. How he was called into my father's office, accused of gross incompetence, shown manipulated reports. He was blindsided. His attempts to explain, to show his own records, were dismissed. The firing was abrupt, the severance package conditional on signing an NDA that basically barred him from ever talking about the circumstances of his departure. It broke me, he admitted, his voice raw. I was a rising star. Suddenly, I was toxic. Couldn't get a decent job in finance for years. Had to start over. My parents helped as much as they could, but he trailed off. I suspected something wasn't right. The numbers didn't add up. And I remember Naomi asking me really specific questions about that particular account just weeks before. Thought she was just curious about the business. He confirmed the strange payments, though he never knew the full extent or where they came from. He said he'd always kept a few copies of his own performance reviews and a small, seemingly innocuous memo he wrote questioning a specific transaction, just in case. He'd almost forgotten about them. You were framed, Ethan, I said, the enormity of it settling over me. Deliberately. By Naomi. And my parents covered it up. He was silent for a long moment. All this time, I thought I messed up somehow. That maybe I was incompetent, and just couldn't see it. The depth of the damage went beyond finances or careers. It was psychological. Naomi hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen his confidence, his reputation, years of his life. Ethan agreed to help. He wanted his name cleared. He wanted justice. He mentioned he might still have that small memo and other relevant documents somewhere in storage. He wasn't seeking financial compensation, just the truth. His willingness, his quiet resolve, solidified my own. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about exposing a lifetime of lies and the people who enabled them. There was a secretary back then, Ethan added before we hung up. A woman named Sarah. She always seemed nervous around Naomi. Gave me a look like she wanted to say something after I was fired, but she never did. Sarah. Another potential witness. Another piece of the puzzle. The web of silence stretched further than I'd realized, but it was beginning to fray. Armed with Ethan's willingness to cooperate and the growing pile of incriminating documents, Claire and I shifted our focus to strategy. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. There were legal implications. Exposing Naomi meant exposing my parents' complicity, their use of business funds for a cover-up. We need to talk to a lawyer, Claire stated. A real one, not your family's guy, Robert, not yet. Just to understand the landscape. We consulted with an independent attorney specializing in fraud and probate law. She confirmed our fears. The estate transfer could definitely be challenged, potentially voided. The cover-up involving company funds could lead to investigations, civil lawsuits from Ethan, and possibly even criminal charges depending on the scale and intent. It was serious. Next step, Sarah. Claire, using her journalistic skills, managed to track down Sarah Evans. She was living a quiet life in a nearby town. Reaching out was difficult. Sarah was terrified. She remembered Ethan, remembered the strange atmosphere, remembered being told explicitly by a senior manager, likely acting on my father's instructions, to keep her mouth shut or risk losing her job and facing legal action herself. They made it sound like I would be in trouble, Sarah said during a hesitant phone call. Her voice trembled. They said I could be seen as complicit if I'd known anything and didn't report it properly, which I didn't, because I didn't understand what was happening, not really. Just that something felt very wrong. I explained that I had proof now, documents, Ethan's testimony. I appealed to her sense of right and wrong, explaining how Ethan's life had been ruined. It took time, reassurance, and Claire confirming that her information could be legally protected if presented correctly, but Sarah finally agreed to provide a sworn statement detailing what she saw and heard, glimpses of Naomi with sensitive files, unusual instructions from management, the palpable fear in the office after Ethan's firing. It wasn't a smoking gun on its own, but it corroborated everything else. As our investigation progressed, my parents seemed to sense the ground shifting beneath their feet. Naomi, perhaps panicking, was clearly feeding them distorted information. The texts and calls escalated. "Caroline, Aria, your father and I are very concerned about your behavior. Naomi is distraught. You're upsetting everyone. John, please reconsider this, Aria. You're making a grave mistake. Family sticks together. Naomi, Becca, why are you doing this? Trying to hurt me again? Just let it go. It was so long ago." Their attempts to gaslight and guilt trip were relentless. I showed the messages to Claire. "It's like they're reading from a script," I sighed. "They're scared," Claire said. "Naomi's scared. She's losing control of the narrative. They're scared because they know you have something, and they can't dismiss you this time." I even tried futilely to show my parents some of the evidence. I went to their house with copies of the most damning documents. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk, seriously. This isn't about my divorce or my apartment. It's about the business, about what happened with Ethan." Caroline's face immediately tightened. "Aria, we've discussed this. That was years ago. It was a difficult period. Naomi needs you right now," John added, refusing to even look at the papers I held out. "Focus on supporting your sister, not dredging up old issues." "Old issues? Dad, this is proof that Naomi committed fraud and you covered it up. Ethan was innocent." Their dismissal was absolute. Caroline pressed a hand to her chest. "Aria, please. Your attitude is very upsetting. Perhaps you should speak to someone. You seem fixated." John stood, his expression hardening. "We won't discuss this further. You're clearly not in a rational state of mind." They refused to see, refused to listen. Their belief in Naomi's fragility, their fear of scandal, was a wall I couldn't break through with reason or evidence. It confirmed my path. There was only one way the truth would come out now. I contacted Robert, the family lawyer, again. This time the meeting was formal. I laid out everything. The documents, Ethan's sworn statement, Sarah's statement. Robert listened, his face grim. He confirmed that, given this evidence, he was legally obligated to advise my parents against proceeding with the estate transfer as planned. He also outlined the potential legal repercussions they faced. This is significant, Aria," Robert said, stacking the papers. "It unravels a great deal. Your parents will be facing difficult questions. And Naomi, this could have very serious consequences for her." "I understand," I said, my voice steady. There was no satisfaction, just a deep, weary resolve. Walking out of Robert's office, I felt lighter, but also heavier. The truth was a burden, but the lies had been crushing. The estate meeting was scheduled for next week. The final confrontation was imminent. There was no turning back now. The web of silence was about to be ripped apart. The days leading up to the estate meeting were a blur of tension and anticipation. My parents' calls and texts became frantic, alternating between pleading and thinly veiled threats. Naomi's messages were more calculated, swinging wildly between tearful guilt trips and passive-aggressive jabs designed to make me doubt myself. "Becca, Mom had to take her anxiety medication again because of you," one message from Naomi read. "Why do you always have to create such drama? This is hurting the family." "Hurting the family?" I muttered to myself, showing the text to Claire. "She orchestrated financial fraud, ruined an innocent man's life, and they covered it up, and I'm hurting the family by bringing it to light?" "They want you to back down," Claire said. "They're using the same old script. Naomi is fragile, you're causing trouble. Don't let them get to you." Then, the unannounced visit. I was making coffee when there was a sharp knock on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Naomi, dressed in an oversized sweater, her hair deliberately messy, eyes wide and seemingly panicked. The victim costume was on full display. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. "What do you want, Naomi?" She pushed past me, not waiting for an invitation. We need to talk, Becca. This has gone too far. She wrung her hands, pacing my small living room. Mom can barely sleep. Dad's talking about seeing a cardiologist because of the stress. You're doing this to them. I leaned against the counter, putting space between us. Funny how their stress levels only spike when they can't control the situation. She stopped pacing. What is that supposed to mean? It means I'm not playing the game anymore, Naomi, I said, my voice calm but firm. The fragile Naomi, strong Aria game. The Aria is difficult. Believe the X game. Her eyes narrowed, the careful vulnerability slipping for just a fraction of a second. You're sounding paranoid again.
Am I?
I held her gaze. You know, I've been thinking a lot about things that get buried. Not in the ground. In old boxes. Things like ledgers. And names. Names like Ethan. Ethan, who lost his career because of unforeseen losses at the business 15 years ago. The color drained from her face. She stumbled back slightly, grabbing the back of a chair for support. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do, I pressed gently. Naomi. My little project went sideways. Handling the Ethan problem. Sound familiar? Her breathing became shallow. You were in the attic? I confirmed. I found the box. The letters. The ledgers. The transfers. Everything. Sarah remembered things too. And Ethan? Ethan's not handled anymore. He remembers everything. Naomi's mask was completely gone now. Her face contorted with fear and something cold and ugly I'd only ever glimpsed before. They'll never believe you, she hissed, her voice raw. You're just jealous. You always have been. Jealous. I almost laughed. Of what, Naomi? Your carefully constructed helplessness? The way you've trapped Mom and Dad in your web of lies? The way you destroy everything you touch and walk away while others pay the price? I haven't trapped anyone, she spat. They love me. They choose me. Because you never gave them a real choice, I said, stepping towards her. You created a reality where they had to protect their poor, delicate daughter from the big, bad world, and from the consequences of her own actions. But consequences have a way of catching up. I didn't show her the proof, just the certainty in my eyes. She was shaking now, not from fear, but from frustrated rage. You're trying to ruin me. No, Naomi, I said, walking to the door and opening it. The evening air felt cool and clean compared to the toxic atmosphere in the room. I'm just finally telling the truth. See you tomorrow. At the meeting. Don't forget to bring your tissues. You're going to need them. After she stumbled out, I locked the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. It was done. The confrontation was over. She knew. The fear in her eyes wasn't a performance. It was real. I texted Claire. She was here. She knows. Claire replied instantly. You okay? Want me to come over? I'm fine, I typed back. It's happening tomorrow. Later that night, calls from my parents came. Furious, demanding I cancel the meeting, threatening to disown me. I forwarded them all to Robert. His response was swift and professional. Meeting proceeds as scheduled. All parties legally notified. Attempting to obstruct could be seen as a violation. The final text came from Naomi. Whatever you think you're doing, please stop. Haven't you heard us enough? I didn't reply. The fight was no longer happening in texts or hushed conversations. It was happening tomorrow. In that conference room. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for their approval or against their narrative. I was fighting for the truth. And that felt stronger than any fragile lie they had ever told. The conference room in Robert's office was too quiet. The polished mahogany table felt cold and imposing. My parents sat on one side, tight-lipped and pale. Naomi was between them, looking unnaturally still, her eyes darting nervously around the room. A notary, a thin man with observant eyes, sat to the side, arranging his papers with meticulous precision. I chose the seat directly across from Naomi, placing my briefcase on the table with a soft thud. I wanted her to see me, to see that I wasn't backing down. Robert cleared his throat, his voice calm and formal. Thank you all for coming. Before we begin discussing the proposed estate transfer, I need to inform everyone that due to the nature of the information to be presented, I have asked certain material witnesses to be present. For transparency and legal accuracy, this meeting will be recorded." He gestured to a small device on the table. My mother's hand flew to her throat. "Witnesses? Recorded? Is that necessary, Robert?" "It is necessary to ensure the integrity of the proceedings, Caroline," Robert replied smoothly, "and to address certain discrepancies that have recently come to light." A soft knock sounded at the door. Naomi flinched. Robert opened it, and Ethan walked in. He looked composed, professional, dressed in a simple suit. His eyes met mine briefly, a shared look of grim determination. "Who is this?" my father demanded, his voice rising. "This is a private family matter. Mr. Ethan Miller is a material witness whose presence is relevant to the discussion of the family business assets and their history," Robert stated, gesturing for Ethan to sit at a separate chair near the table. Naomi's fingers trembled as she reached for her water glass. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You remember him, Naomi," I said softly, my gaze fixed on her. "From handling that problem at the business." Her eyes widened, a flash of pure terror replacing the practiced fragility. "Show them, Robert," I instructed. Robert began calmly, laying out copies of the documents on the table. He started with the general financial reports from that period, then moved to the specific spreadsheets detailing the suspicious transactions. "These documents," Robert stated, his tone factual, "recently came into Ms. Aria's possession. They suggest a significant financial loss to the business approximately 15 years ago was not due to market conditions or employee incompetence, but was the result of deliberate manipulation." He then presented the memos, the ones about handling the Ethan problem, the notes about minimizing exposure. My parents' faces were ashen as they saw the familiar handwriting, the internal language. "Where did you get these?" Caroline whispered, her voice hoarse. "The attic, Mom," I replied. "Right where you buried them. Along with the truth." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Stop this. This is ridiculous. Fabricated." "They are corroborated, John," Robert said firmly, holding up Ethan's sworn statement. "Mr. Miller was the employee unfairly blamed and terminated as a direct result of this incident. He has provided a statement detailing the false accusations and the circumstances of his dismissal." Ethan spoke then, his voice steady, recounting being framed, the abrupt firing, the conditional severance. He described the personal and professional devastation. Naomi started to tremble uncontrollably, no longer performing, just terrified. "He's lying. It was an accident. He was incompetent." "He wasn't incompetent, Naomi," I said. "You were fraudulent. And you ruined his life to cover your tracks." Then, Robert presented Sarah's statement, detailing what she saw and heard, Naomi's suspicious behavior, the pressure on employees to stay silent, the climate of fear. The carefully constructed world my parents and Naomi had built around lies began to crumble. My parents stared at the documents, at Ethan, at me. The reality of their complicity, documented and witnessed, hit them. Naomi erupted, no longer the delicate flower, but a cornered animal. You did this," she shrieked, pointing at me. "You're jealous. You want to destroy us. You've always hated me." "I never hated you, Naomi," I said, the words heavy with years of suppressed pain. "I just wanted you to face reality. The reality you avoided by hiding behind Mom and Dad, by hurting innocent people, by destroying the business to save your own image." Robert cut through the chaos. "Based on the evidence presented, the proposed transfer of the family business is highly problematic and cannot proceed at this time. This constitutes potential civil fraud against Mr. Miller and the business itself. Furthermore, the use of business funds to conceal this matter raises serious questions regarding financial impropriety and potential obstruction, which could warrant further investigation by legal authorities." My father slumped in his chair, looking broken. My mother was openly weeping, though whether for Naomi, themselves, or the shattered family image, I couldn't tell. Naomi was a picture of raw, ugly panic, her previous fragility forgotten. I watched it all unfold. The years of being the survivor, the difficult one, the one who just needed to process while they protected the real architect of chaos. There was no triumphant feeling, only exhaustion and a profound sense of loss. The family I had, however flawed, was irrevocably broken by the weight of its own secrets. Leaving the office felt like walking out of a tomb. The air outside was crisp, the city sounds a stark contrast to the implosion that had just occurred. Ethan walked with me to the street. "Thank you, Aria," he said, his voice full of genuine emotion. "For doing this. For clearing my name." "You're welcome, Ethan," I replied. "You deserve the truth." I called Claire. "It's done," I said, my voice flat. The meeting happened. And the truth came out, I told her. All of it. The family business, their legacy, would likely be tied up in legal proceedings for a long time. Naomi faced potential lawsuits and investigations. My parents faced the consequences of their choices and the destruction of the narrative they had lived by. The family was fractured beyond repair. Walking away, I didn't land on my feet. I landed on solid ground. Ground built not on comforting lies or convenient fictions, but on hard, undeniable truth. It was a lonely place, but it was finally truly mine, and that was worth everything they had tried to take away.